At Elite Motors, Silicon Valley's most prestigious luxury car dealership, appearances are everything. So when a shabby elderly man in worn-out clothes shuffles through their gleaming showroom, the salespeople barely hide their disdain. Little do they know that this 85-year-old nobody holds the patent to a revolutionary electric vehicle technology that every major car manufacturer is desperately trying to acquire. Their dismissive treatment of him will trigger a chain of events that will shake the entire automotive industry to its core. What happens next is a masterful lesson in humility, revenge, and the dangerous game of judging a book by its cover. The shocking truth about this mysterious old man's identity and what he does with his $47 billion fortune will leave you speechless. Like and subscribe to follow each part of this incredible story that proves respect isn't just about good manners. Sometimes it's about survival. The morning sun glinted off the polished surfaces of luxury vehicles at Elite Motors, Silicon Valley's premier automotive dealership. James Chen, the dealership's top salesman, was adjusting his Italian silk tie while watching a new Lamborghini being positioned in the showroom when he noticed an elderly man slowly making his way toward the entrance. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, James could see the man was wearing outdated clothing, a faded brown cardigan, worn khakis, and scuffed shoes that had clearly seen better days. His weathered hands gripped a simple wooden cane, and his thin white hair was slightly disheveled. James sighed in annoyance, already dreading what he assumed would be a waste of his valuable time. As the old man pushed through the heavy glass doors, the other salespeople quickly made themselves scarce, leaving James to deal with the unwanted visitor. The elderly man's eyes, however, showed a sharp intelligence that seemed at odds with his shabby appearance as he carefully examined each vehicle in the showroom. "Can I help you?" James asked, making little effort to hide his condescension. The old man smiled gently. "Yes, I'm interested in purchasing several vehicles. I'm particularly curious about your electric models." James barely suppressed an eye roll. Several vehicles. This man looked like he could barely afford the bus fare home. "Sir, our electric vehicles start at $175,000. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at a used car lot." "Price isn't an issue," the old man replied calmly. "I'm more concerned with the technical specifications. What's the battery range on your flagship model?" "Listen," James cut him off, "we have serious customers waiting. Unless you can prove you have the means to make a purchase—" "Ah, yes," the old man interrupted, reaching into his worn cardigan. "Would this help?" He pulled out a business card that made James's blood run cold. The name on the card read, Dr. William Morrison, Chief Innovation Officer, Morrison Quantum Technologies. James's hands began to tremble slightly. Morrison Quantum Technologies was the most talked-about company in Silicon Valley. Their revolutionary quantum battery technology was rumored to be worth billions, with every major car manufacturer desperately trying to secure licensing rights. But surely this shabby old man couldn't be... "You're Dr. Morrison?" James asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. "The same," the old man replied, his eyes twinkling. "Though these days, most people have forgotten what I look like. I prefer it that way. Lets me see how people truly behave when they think no one's watching." Before James could respond, the dealership's door chimed again. A group of executives in expensive suits strode in, led by Marcus Wong, CEO of one of the largest electric vehicle manufacturers in Asia. They stopped short at the sight of Dr. Morrison. "Bill!" Marcus exclaimed warmly. "I didn't expect to find you here. Have you considered our licensing offer?" Dr. Morrison smiled at Marcus before turning back to James, whose face had lost all color. "I was just discussing a potential fleet purchase with this young man, though he seems to think I might be more comfortable elsewhere." Marcus's expression darkened. "Do you mean to tell me that, Doctor?" Morrison, the man who revolutionized electric vehicle technology and holds patents worth billions, wasn't treated with respect in your dealership. James felt the floor shifting beneath his feet. Not only had he dismissed the most important potential customer of his career, but he'd done so in front of one of the most powerful CEOs in the automotive industry. I didn't know, James stammered. That's rather the point, isn't it? Dr. Morrison said quietly. You didn't know who I was, so you decided I wasn't worth your time. I wonder how many other potential customers you've judged the same way. The old man turned to Marcus. Shall we discuss that licensing deal over lunch? I believe I've seen everything I need to see here. As Dr. Morrison and the executives left the dealership, James remained frozen in place, realizing that his treatment of one shabby-looking elderly man might have just cost Elite Motors the biggest deal in its history. But as he would soon discover, this was only the beginning of the consequences that would unfold from his momentary lapse in judgment. The following morning, James arrived at Elite Motors to find the dealership in chaos. Richard Sterling, the owner, had called an emergency staff meeting. The normally composed businessman was pacing frantically, his designer suit wrinkled and his tie askew. Do you have any idea what you've done? Sterling demanded, glaring at James. Dr. Morrison isn't just any customer. He's about to announce an exclusive partnership with one of the major manufacturers for his quantum battery technology. Every dealership in the country has been trying to secure fleet contracts for when those vehicles hit the market. James felt sick. Mr. Sterling, I had no idea. That's not even the worst part, Sterling interrupted, throwing a newspaper onto the conference table. The headline made everyone gasp. Morrison Quantum Technologies acquires controlling interest in Elite Motors' parent company. He bought our parent company, James stammered. Not just bought, he now owns 51% of Chromlux International, which means he effectively controls all 142 dealerships across the country, including Elite Motors. Sterling slumped into his chair. And his first order of business as majority shareholder is to conduct a comprehensive review of customer service practices at every location. The implications hit James like a physical blow. Dr. Morrison hadn't just been shopping for cars yesterday, he'd been evaluating the dealership itself, and James had given him a front-row demonstration of everything wrong with the luxury car sales industry. Before anyone could speak further, the conference room door opened. Dr. Morrison walked in, still wearing his shabby cardigan, but now accompanied by a team of professional consultants carrying laptops and tablets. Good morning, he said pleasantly, as if he hadn't just executed one of the most strategic corporate takeovers in recent history. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Sterling jumped to his feet. Dr. Morrison, I want to personally apologize for yesterday's incident. I assure you it doesn't reflect our company's values. But it does, Mr. Sterling. Dr. Morrison cut him off gently. That's precisely why I'm here. He took a seat at the head of the conference table, his sharp eyes scanning the room. You see, yesterday wasn't my first visit to an Elite Motors dealership. Over the past month, I've visited 27 of your locations across the country, dressed exactly like this. Want to guess how many treated me with respect? The silence in the room was deafening. None, he continued. Not a single one. Oh, 5 of them were polite enough to suggest I visit a used car lot instead of outright ignoring me. But not one salesperson bothered to ask my name, learn my story, or treat me like a human being worthy of their time. He pulled out a tablet, showing security camera footage from various dealerships. In each clip, elderly or modestly dressed customers were being ignored or dismissed by salespeople. This isn't just about my experience, Dr. Morrison explained. It's about a systemic problem in the luxury car industry. We've created a culture where wealth is assumed to have a certain look, where worth is measured by appearance rather than character. He turned to James. "Mr. Chen, you're actually one of the reasons I decided to acquire Chromlux?" James felt his heart stop. "Sir? Your interaction with me yesterday was so perfectly emblematic of everything wrong with this industry that I knew this company would be the perfect testing ground for my new initiative." Dr. Morrison stood, walking to the window overlooking the showroom. "You see, the quantum battery technology everyone's so excited about, it's not just about powering cars, it's about powering change. And starting today, Elite Motors is going to help me demonstrate exactly how that change should look." He turned back to the stunned group. "I'm implementing a new sales policy across all Chromlux dealerships. Every customer, regardless of appearance, will be treated with equal respect and dignity. Sales commissions will be restructured to prioritize customer satisfaction over total sales. And most importantly," he smiled, "we're going to start a very special program that I think will shake up the entire industry." The old man's eyes twinkled with an almost mischievous light as he detailed his plan, leaving everyone in the room stunned by its audacity and scope. But as James would soon learn, Dr. Morrison's true motivations ran much deeper than just reforming the luxury car industry, and his connection to Elite Motors was far more personal than anyone could have imagined. Dr. Morrison's Dignity Initiative, as it came to be known, transformed Elite Motors over the next month. The showroom was redesigned to be more welcoming, with comfortable seating areas and a coffee bar open to anyone who walked in. Price tags were removed from vehicles, and salespeople were retrained to focus on understanding customers' needs rather than making assumptions about their buying power. But it was the Second Chance Saturday program that truly shocked the industry. Every Saturday, the dealership invited homeless individuals and people down on their luck to come in, get cleaned up in the newly installed executive washrooms, and learn about financial literacy and job opportunities, all while being treated with the same respect as any luxury car buyer. James, to his surprise, was not fired. Instead, Dr. Morrison insisted he oversee the Saturday program, saying, "Sometimes the best teachers are those who have learned the hardest lessons." One particular Saturday, as James was helping a former veteran select a suit from the clothing rack they'd installed, another of Dr. Morrison's innovations, he noticed the old inventor sitting quietly in the corner, observing everything with those keen eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Chen," Dr. Morrison called him over. "Walk with me." They strolled through the showroom, now busy with an unusual mix of wealthy customers and people from the Saturday program, all mingling and chatting comfortably. "Do you know why I'm really doing this?" Dr. Morrison asked, stopping beside a vintage Rolls-Royce displayed in the corner. "To change the industry's culture?" James ventured. Dr. Morrison smiled sadly. "This was my father's model," he said, touching the Rolls-Royce's hood. "He worked as a janitor at an Elite Motors dealership in 1960, saved every penny he earned. One day, he came in to buy a car. Not this model, just a basic one. He'd brought cash for the full amount." He paused, his eyes distant with memory. "They threw him out. Wouldn't even let him explain. Called the police on him for suspicious behavior. He died 2 years later, his dream of owning a nice car unfulfilled. The money he'd saved went to my education instead." James felt a weight in his chest as Dr. Morrison continued. "That education led me to MIT, where I developed the quantum battery technology everyone's so excited about. But you know what I remember most from all those years of study? The look in my father's eyes when those salespeople treated him like he was nothing." He turned to James. "The quantum battery technology isn't just an invention, it's my father's revenge. With it, we'll make electric vehicles so affordable that luxury cars will become obsolete unless they offer something more than just status. And that something more is what we're building here: dignity, respect, humanity. Just then, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A group of executives from Chromlux's board of directors had arrived, led by Senior Vice President Howard Sterling, Richard Sterling's father and the company's largest shareholder after Dr. Morrison. "This has gone far enough," Howard Sterling announced loudly. "Our quarterly profits are down 15% because of these social experiments. We demand an emergency board meeting to review these policies." Dr. Morrison remained calm. "The board can meet whenever you'd like, Howard. But perhaps first, you'd like to explain why you never told anyone about September 15th, 1960. Howard Sterling's face went pale. "What?" "The day you personally called the police on a janitor trying to buy a car. The day you had James Morrison, my father, arrested for daring to dream beyond his social station." The showroom had gone completely silent. Howard Sterling stumbled backward slightly. That was your father?" "Yes," Dr. Morrison said quietly. "And you were the salesman who threw him out. I recognized you from the old photos when I was researching Chromlux before the takeover. I wondered if you'd remember." I had no idea." "No, you wouldn't have. Just like you had no idea that janitor's son would one day own your company." Dr. Morrison's voice remained gentle, but carried an undeniable force. "The board can meet, Mr. Sterling, but first, I think you should join us for next Saturday's program. You might learn something about judging people by their appearance." As Howard Sterling stood there speechless, James finally understood. This wasn't just about changing the luxury car industry. It was about changing hearts and minds, one person at a time. And sometimes, the greatest lessons came from the most unexpected teachers. The confrontation with Howard Sterling sparked a media frenzy. The story of the janitor's son, who revolutionized electric vehicle technology and bought the company that once humiliated his father, went viral. Business magazines hailed it as the ultimate long-game revenge. But Dr. Morrison had other plans in mind. At the emergency board meeting, instead of defending his policies, Dr. Morrison made an announcement that left everyone stunned. He was converting Elite Motors and all Chromlux dealerships into a new kind of business model, a social enterprise dealership. "Starting today," he declared, 50% of our profits will go into a foundation that provides transportation solutions for low-income families and job training for the unemployed. The other 50% will be shared between employees at all levels, from janitors to executives." Howard Sterling jumped to his feet. "You can't do this. The shareholders..." "The shareholders," Dr. Morrison interrupted calmly, "will receive a very generous buyout offer. Those who wish to remain can do so under the new model. Those who don't, well, I hear there are plenty of traditional dealerships still operating under the old system." He then revealed the true genius of his plan. His quantum battery technology would be licensed exclusively to manufacturers who agreed to sell their vehicles through the reformed Chromlux network. Given that his batteries could power a car for 1,000 miles on a single charge and cost a fraction of traditional batteries to produce, it was an offer manufacturers couldn't refuse. "Think about it," he told the board. "We're not just selling cars anymore. We're selling hope, dignity, and second chances, and surprisingly, that sells better than luxury ever did." The numbers backed him up. Despite the initial profit dip Howard Sterling had complained about, customer satisfaction scores had skyrocketed. More importantly, wealthy clients were actually choosing Elite Motors specifically because of its social mission. The dealership had become a status symbol of a different kind, one based on social consciousness rather than mere wealth. James, who had been invited to attend the board meeting, watched in amazement as Dr. Morrison systematically dismantled the old way of doing business. But the biggest surprise came when the old inventor called him to the front of the room. "Mr. Chen has demonstrated something remarkable," Dr. Morrison announced. "He's shown that people can change, that lessons in humility can lead to genuine transformation. That's why I'm appointing him as the director of our new Dignity Initiative training program." James stood there, shocked. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll help me teach others what you've learned," Dr. Morrison replied. "Your journey from dismissing an old man in shabby clothes to understanding the true meaning of dignity. That's a lesson every salesperson in this industry needs to learn." Howard Sterling, who had remained silent after his initial outburst, suddenly spoke up. "What about me?" His voice was quieter now, almost humble. "What lesson am I supposed to learn from all this?" Dr. Morrison smiled gently. "The same lesson my father tried to teach you in 1960, that every person who walks through those doors carries dreams, hopes, and inherent worth. You just have to be willing to see it." He reached into his ever-present shabby cardigan and pulled out a worn, black-and-white photograph. It showed a young Howard Sterling standing in front of Elite Motors, circa 1960, next to a man in janitor's clothes who was smiling proudly. "This was taken the day before my father tried to buy that car," Dr. Morrison said, passing the photo to Howard. "He actually spoke highly of you, said you were always kind to him when he was cleaning. What changed the next day, Mr. Sterling? What made you look at the same man differently just because he dared to be a customer instead of a janitor?" Howard Sterling's hands trembled as he held the photograph. I was trying to protect the dealership's image. It was what we were taught back then." "And now?" Dr. Morrison prompted. "And now?" Howard's voice cracked. "I understand what my prejudice cost. Not just your father's dignity, but my own humanity." 1 year later, Elite Motors celebrated the first anniversary of its transformation with a special event that brought the automotive industry's story full circle. The showroom, once a temple of exclusivity, was filled with an extraordinary mix of people. Wealthy executives, former homeless individuals who'd found employment through the Dignity Initiative, manufacturers' representatives, and employees from all levels of the company. At the center of it all stood a restored 1960 Rolls-Royce, the same model James Morrison had once dreamed of buying. Dr. Morrison had tracked down and purchased the exact vehicle his father had hoped to own, restoring it to pristine condition. But instead of keeping it as a trophy of revenge, he had different plans. "This car, Dr. Morrison announced to the gathered crowd, will never be sold. Instead, it will travel between all Chromlux dealerships as a reminder of where we came from and why we changed. But more importantly, it will serve a special purpose." He revealed that every Chromlux location would use the Rolls-Royce to provide free rides to job interviews for individuals trying to rebuild their lives. "My father never got to own his dream car," Dr. Morrison said, "but his dream of dignity for all will live on through it." Howard Sterling, who had chosen to remain with the company after its transformation, stepped forward. The past year had changed him profoundly. He now regularly participated in the Saturday programs, sharing his own journey from prejudice to understanding. "I've spent 50 years in this industry," Howard said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I never understood what we were really selling until now. It's not about the cars. It's about the respect, the dignity, the chance to dream bigger than society says you should." James Chen, who had successfully launched the Dignity Initiative training program across all Chromlux locations, stood nearby with tears in his eyes. The program had already trained over 1,000 salespeople, changing the way luxury vehicles were sold across the country. Other dealership networks were now seeking to implement similar programs, recognizing that social consciousness had become the new luxury. Dr. Morrison saved the biggest announcement for last. Today I'm establishing the James Morrison Dignity Foundation with a $5 billion endowment from my quantum battery patents. This foundation will ensure that our mission continues long after I'm gone. He then turned to James Chen. And I'm appointing Mr. Chen as its first director. Sometimes those who've learned the hardest lessons become the best teachers. The event concluded with a special ceremony where Dr. Morrison handed over the keys to the restored Rolls-Royce to a former homeless veteran who would be its first driver, providing rides to job seekers while sharing his own story of transformation. As the crowds mingled afterward, Dr. Morrison found a quiet moment to visit the small memorial plaque now mounted beside the Rolls-Royce. It bore a simple inscription, "In memory of James Morrison, a janitor who taught us that true luxury is measured not in dollars, but in dignity." The old inventor touched the plaque gently. "We did it, Dad," he whispered. "We changed their hearts." Today, Elite Motors and the Chrome Lux network stand as a testament to the power of dignity over discrimination, of respect over prejudice. The quantum battery technology revolutionized the automotive industry, but it was the revolution in human dignity that proved to be Dr. Morrison's greatest legacy. The shabby old man who walked into a dealership 1 year ago did more than just teach a lesson about judging by appearances. He showed the world that the most powerful form of revenge isn't punishment but transformation. And in doing so, he turned a son's pain into a father's lasting gift to humanity.